Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Rossiter, and on behalf of the Texas Industrial Energy Efficiency Program, welcome to our Water Forum. TIEEP is a program of SECO, the Texas State Energy Conservation Office, and it is administered by Energy at the University of Houston. For many years, the Water Forum has been run in collaboration with the South Texas section of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers and co-located with one of their monthly dinner meetings. For obvious reasons, due to the current restrictions on in-person meetings, the dinner has been canceled, so we're running the Water Forum as a webinar. However, we'd still like to recognize our partnership with STS-AIChE, and if you stay online at the end of the Water Forum, we will transition to the South Texas section's monthly dinner meeting. Although, of course, it will be a technical meeting without a dinner under the circumstances. We would also like to acknowledge STS-AIChE's sponsor for this meeting, Culligan, and we would like to thank them for their support. You'll be hearing from them more in a moment. The theme of the Water Forum is Save Energy While You Save Water, Better Equipment and Better Strategies. We have lined up some excellent speakers on this topic, as you can see from the slide. We'll start with Jim Wark from Culligan. He will talk about advancements in water purification, and more specifically, a new water purification technology called membrane capacitive deionization. Next, Somnath Basu from Headworks International, together with Paul Sun, will talk about petroleum refinery wastewater treatment, and they will present some case studies. Finally, Juan Pinto of Energy Recovery Incorporated will talk about energy consumption and desalination, including a discussion of an interesting technology for hydraulic power recovery. And then, if you're able to stay on past the Water Forum for the South Texas section meeting, we'll get a look at water management from a very different perspective. The speaker is Jason Afinowicz, and he will be talking about long-range water planning for the greater Houston area. I'd now like to hand this over just for a moment to our sponsor, Culligan. And Jim, I think you are going to give us a talk to us just for a few minutes. Jim, are you there? Jim Wark, you there? Jim, you are muted. I guess I can unmute you. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Try now, Jim. Sorry about that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you now.
Okay. I want to thank everybody for being able to join us in these trying times. Hope everybody is staying safe and starting to get back to busyness, and I hope all aren't being affected as badly as others. Culligan Water, as you know, has been in the forefront of water treatment now for several decades, and we have the availability to help people with all of their commercial, industrial, and residential water treatment demands and needs. We have partnered on some projects here with Voltea, which is a manufacturer of this new technology that we're going to be speaking of, and have had great success and are actually going to show at the end of a slide an actual unit that was just finished here locally. So want to again thank everybody for joining us. Hope that sometime in the future you can use this, and look forward to the questions and answers afterwards. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks so much, Jim. We'll come back to you in just a minute. But meanwhile, just a little bit of housekeeping here. Many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with Zoom, but just for those who are not, there are a few little things I wanted to make you aware of. If you move your cursor down to the bottom of your screen, you should see a ribbon as shown here, the sort of black ribbon. And on it, there are a number of icons, which you may need to use to control your experience while you're on the webinar. The extreme left side, of course, the microphone icon, and then next to it, the video icon. So clicking those will mute and unmute and turn the video on and off. The other ones that I wanted to really point out in particular are this one here, which is participants. And that will tell you who is on the meeting, who is in the meeting. So if you click on that button, you will bring up a list and you can then see who is participating. That's going to be important. I'll come back to that in a minute. The next one that you need to be aware of is the chat icon over here. This one here, like a quotation box. That will bring up a chat capability, a text message capability. That brings up the text message capability here. So you can then select either to send a message to everyone or to individual people, depending on which you choose. So again, we'll come back to that in a minute because you will need that for some of the things we'll be doing later. And specifically, those of you who are interested in getting certificates of participation for professional development hour certificates, we are able to do this. This is primarily for engineers who need professional development hours. If you would like a certificate of participation, please send a chat message to Lee Lopez, and you'll see her name there as it will appear in the chat box. So send a chat message to Lee Lopez, and she then will prepare the necessary certificate for you. So it should be L Lopez 37 would be her ID. So send a chat message to her if you are interested in getting a certificate, specifically a certificate that is good for use in Texas and other states which have minimal requirements for validation. So you will need to send a message showing your name and put the line in the line somewhere there, water forum, so we know you're referring to the water forum for your certificate. I say this because we're also going on in the same Zoom meeting into the STS dinner meeting or the STS technical meeting later, and that will have a separate identifier for that PDH form. And then also provide your email address, so Lee will be able to send you your certificate to your email address. For those who require certificates for other states that have more rigorous requirements, we have a collaboration with LG Environmental Engineering. They're an authorized provider in the state of Florida, and they will be able to certify for you if we can demonstrate your participation in this webinar, specifically in the water forum. Again, Lee is acting as the focal point for this. In this case, though, what you'll need to do is to send her an email with some additional information. You'll need to send your name, the certificate number on your professional engineer's license, and the licensing entity that for which you require certification, and that could be a state or a country. And her email address is given there, llopez37@central.uh.edu. So please make a note of that, and also make a note of what you're required to provide in order to get your certificate. All right, without further ado, I would like to pass you on to our first speaker, who is Jim Wark. Now, detailed bios are available on our website, so I'm not going to go through this very quickly, but Jim is a specialist in water treatment, as you know, with Culligan. And without further ado, what I need to do is to hand over control to him to run the next stage of our presentation. So Jim, you should now be receiving control.
Fine.
I'm sorry there, we had you muted for a moment there, Jim. Go ahead.
Okay, can everybody hear me fine now?
Yes, that's better, thanks.
Okay, Alan, just so you know, I do not have my slides on the side, but that's okay, we'll work through it.
Okay.
Everybody, again, I'm Jim Wark with Culligan Water. We are one of the world's most renowned water treatment manufacturers and service providers. We handle anything from standard water softening to reverse osmosis to deionization, chemical feed, you name it, we're involved with it, whether it be in the commercial, industrial, or residential side of things. I want to quickly reach out and say hello to those of you who are invited from the Philippines to join in on this. Hope you enjoy what's going on and learn from this. And we will move forward. We are working with Voltea, a local manufacturer of capacitive deionization, salt-free, chemical-free water purification that has many new niche applications to be used, and we'll be talking about some of those here coming up. Okay. I'm trying to, we're having a glitch here for a second. Alan, there we go. I see these. Sorry, folks. My stuff has disappeared. Anyway.
The slides are on the screen. You needing to get to somewhere else?
Can you hear me?
Yes, hear you now.
Hello, hello.
I hear you. We hear you.
Hello, I've been Hello, can anybody
Yes.
still hear me? I was dumped completely off of
Yeah, we hear you.
program.
We hear you. We hear you. Can
Hello
you hear
again.
me?
Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we hear you. We hear you. Keep talking, Jim. Jim, we hear you.
Everyone but him should shut off their mics because you're getting all sorts of background noise.
I'm sorry if I was dumped. I'm going to continue as if everybody can hear me. I apologize. But what capacitive deionization does and the void that it fills is many people are aware of water softening and the ion exchange process and the RO process. How capacitive deionization works is, as you can see, the water passes through a membrane patch that has both anion and cation cells that pull the impurities to both the cation and anion sides of the unit. Unlike reverse osmosis, where energy from a pump is used to pressurize the water through the membrane, in capacitive deionization, the water is allowed to freely pass through the system without the pump, but with the charges on the membranes that are put into effect, the membranes catch the impurities and allow only the better quality water to pass through. Now, unlike deionization itself, it doesn't give you the 99+% rejection of contaminants, but somewhere in the vicinity of 70, 80, 85%. So it's very good for the removal of cations and anions that are mixed in water, that a softener can only do the cations, and deionization is more for your anions and other contaminants. So it fits a very nice niche for this purpose. It's also used in household applications where you don't want the brine discharge from a water softener, as many cities in California have now, where they have an actual brine restriction where it can't go into the septic or the sewer systems. And this can basically be run out to the lawn as part of irrigation or into a simple sewer. So that's another key application. I'm still trying to move ahead on my slides and it just isn't working here.
Okay.
So Alan, do you have a way that you can move ahead on the slides for me
Yes,
here,
well,
since I've lost complete
I
control
will
on this?
take back control.
I don't even show what we talked about earlier.
Okay, let's go back into that then.
There we go. Now I'm getting somewhere.
All right, I think I now have control. You want to move on? You see that?
All right. Boy, I'm getting kind of lost here, but anyway, the deionization and purification necessary and why it's done. Hardness, like I said, is usually followed by water softening, done to protect water heaters, plumbing elements, scaling from naturally hard water. When you get into some of the heavier things like iron and potassium and chlorides and things like this, people try, in most cases, to use deionization. When we get into the toxic compounds, we'll use either specialty resins or chelation resins or different types of oxidants and mixed oxidants to remove them. And then when we're used on things like recovery of gold from jewelry and electronics, a lot of time we'll use ultra pure deionization or selective ion exchange resins. Next, please. Here's a simple drawing of how the capacitive deionization stacks up against an RO membrane. The capacitive deionization, as you see, are layered membranes that look like square 45s, basically, if you're old enough to remember the 45s. And they're stacked in a cell that allows for water to flow through the system and the contaminants to be caught, where an RO system, you have a spiral wound membrane. You can't adjust basically the quality of water unless you bypass the system. They don't work real well at high temperatures and some chemicals. Also, because of the energy use, sometimes it's not practical because of high energy use and a lot of maintenance and a lot of operator intervention. A lot of people having to control the pressures, make sure that the pre-filters and post-filters are operating properly, make sure that your chemical feed and your pH control are done. So in some instances, yeah, RO is needed and it's the best technology available. In many cases though now, capacitive deionization can fit in, fill that void, and save on cost, energy savings, and operator expense and involvement. Hoping to get to the next one here, please. All right. Again, against another technology, again, you have the brine and pure water that goes through our systems and the membranes and water in, and then against other plated membrane technologies. Again, you have issues with the chemical usage, potential of membrane fouling, high maintenance requirements, and again, the intervention of operators having to run the equipment. The Voltaia unit has a nice feature that it's can be monitored remotely. It can be monitored from the factory if you have Wi-Fi available, so they can monitor it for you. So it's a nice capability that a lot of equipment companies don't yet have. Next, please. As you can see, we go from the membrane cells to stacks to modules and into systems that can go from anywhere from a household unit that might make 500 to 1,000 gallons a day to fully automatic systems like we have with a beverage company that's at 50 gallons per minute making energy drinks. They found that the use of this type of system would be very advantageous to using an RO and then having to reconstitute the water to fit some of the controls that they have on their systems. Next, please. Again, this here is the smaller unit that we're talking about, a DI use or DI entry. These simple module put into a system, controls here on the side that take care of everything. And then this is the regenerant bottle that's used for the whole system. It's basically citric acid. In a commercial application, you might use a little stronger acid, but it does everything automatic and takes care of itself. All you got to do is look at the bottle and make sure it's not empty. Next, please. Again, Voltea has over 100 global patents pertaining to their technology, how it's implemented into modules and membranes, and it's a very, very high quality use of ion selective membranes that they actually manufacture and do under their own patents. Next, please. So here's some of the differentials between the two. Between salt-free softening has one of the advantages because the deionization, capacitive deionization is tunable. You can set the quality of water that you basically want. So unlike a softener where some people feel the water's too slippery, not feeling like it's really soft, this you're allowed to change it the way you want. High water recovery, very, very low energy consumption. Basically, when a household unit regenerates, it's like using a small square 9-volt battery, the amount of electricity that's using. It can still do the removal of contaminants at high temperatures. It's unaffected by silica and chlorine, something that RO systems hate. Here's some of the industrial product lines, anywhere from a simple 2 system to a 6, up to, they go up even up to 40, but they're towered modular to fit the needs that you have, and they can be built to tie in together modularly to hundreds and hundreds of gallons per minute, even into containers that you'll see later. Next slide, please. Here's a large unit. This is similar to the one that we're putting in the beverage factory. It'll do almost 50 gallons per minute, automated controls, simple racks. The racks are easily interchangeable and the cells are very easy to change. 2 bolts, matter of a couple minutes and you've already changed a cell when needed. And speaking of that, as needed is in the 5 to 7 year range. Lasts as long as ion exchange resin usually does in a water softener, as a matter of fact. Now, what Voltea has done is they've come up with theory development kits, and these are basic smaller units that can be taken out for a pilot test for applications where you want to see if it'll work, you don't know if it'll work, you don't want to be that first guy to jump onto the bandwagon and be embarrassed if it doesn't work. Well, we have the capability of coming out to you, testing the theory first, seeing the results for yourself first before you buy a system. Now, in most cases, there's a modest charge for the setup and delivery and trial on these things, but if the purchase is made, all of that is returned towards the purchase price. Next. As I was saying, the unit has dynamic control that can be controlled remotely. It can be controlled right on site, or it can be controlled by an operator on hand. The unit is monitored if chosen by at live time, not anything that you're waiting for somebody to go read your numbers. You can read it live. You can see the quality of water coming in, the quality of water coming out, and the volume. Go ahead, next.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop sharing because
I was able to get through that. I hope everybody understood what I was saying and caught on. I'm really sorry that it got done this way, but for some reason I just got bumped right out. So Alan, if you could take over and we could do the questions and answers.
Yes, so I'm just checking for any questions that have come in. There are two here that I have for you, fairly basic. And I think you had a colleague who was joining you as well, but I've not been able to identify him on the guest list. But in any event, the two questions that I have at this stage are asking about applications in...
Alan, are you able to take over control?
Yes, so you should be out of the presentation. I have control at the moment. So yeah, can you hear me, Jim? Can you hear me, Jim? Jim, can you hear me? Okay. We seem to have an audio problem with Jim. I believe most people are able to hear correct. If anyone is having problems hearing, please let me know.
Alan, this is Josh from Voltaire, so I can hear you, and I work for Voltaire. So if there are any technical questions, I am more than happy to step in and answer these.
Ah, excellent, thank you. And it seems like Jim has lost his audio link. So yeah, the two questions that I had received, one of them was just a general one about applications. Do you have any applications in refining and chemical plants in the Houston area?
So we have a number of industrial applications across the world. We have oh, I'm getting some feedback there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to mute everyone if we have this problem, and then I'm going to have to come back and unmute you. So here we go.
So I believe you've unmuted me.
Yep, there you go.
So to answer that question, we have a number of industrial applications across the world, as well as a significant number in the US. We have just recently installed a system, which I don't think we managed to get to in this presentation, but if you go to the Voltaire LinkedIn, you'll see a post on a system that's just recently been installed in a oil and gas tube manufacturing plant down in the Houston area, and we're looking to grow the business in the Houston area. But to answer your question, yes, we have a number of systems installed in steel mills and refinery type applications. The main applications that we tend to go after on the more industrial side would be cooling towers, process feed water, and we also do a number of recycling applications where we will take a water that's higher in TDS, reduce that TDS down tunably, as Jim spoke about. So be able to remove 50 to 75, 80%, whatever the customer requires, by tuning the electricity or the power that we send to our system to dial it in and tune that output water quality to whatever the customer requires. So that's one of the main features and where we use it.
Right, so I see there's some other questions in the chat, and I think Jim has got involved in addressing some of them. But so the two that I see here specifically, there's a question about recovery factor and rejection rate. Roughly what percentage of the water would you recover? What would you end up rejecting? And especially this relates specifically to silica issues.
So with respect to the recovery, we will look to recover between 75 and 90% of the water that we treat. So 10 to 25% down the drain. And then with respect to silica is uncharged. Because we're using electricity to remove the ions, we remove any charged species, as silica is basically uncharged, we will not remove this. So it will just flow through. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword in that if you require that silica removal, you'd have to do it either before or after the system. But if you don't need that silica reduction, then it will just flow through the system. It won't cause any fouling issues.
Okay. So if silica is a problem to you, then this may not be the ideal application.
We would have to pair it with a pre or post treatment step to remove that silica.
And what about capacity? That was another question I see here. How big do you get? Because a lot of refining applications and large scale petrochemicals are pretty big capacity.
Understood. So the system is very, very modular, as Jim said. So it's based around that cell that you saw earlier in the presentation. We stack up those cells into stacks into modules, and then we can basically stack as many modules onto a system as is required and dictated by the flow. So it's similar to reverse osmosis in RO. If you have a higher flow, you use more membranes to reach that higher flow. With CAPDI, if you have a higher flow, you use more modules. The largest system that we have is that IS-48, and then we can connect multiple IS-48s together in parallel to reach higher flows, and we can pull controls out and run them in a master-slave configuration from a master control panel so that we can run theoretically any number of IS-48s together to reach the flow rate required.
Of course, the obvious challenge to that is what does that do to costs? Presumably you don't get much of a benefit for economy of scale.
So there are some economies of scale going from the smallest skid sizes to the larger skid sizes. But you're correct, obviously, if we have multiple skids, then the costs will add up. However, when we go to the higher volume, then we can do things with discounts and manufacturing to offset the increased cost.
Okay. Another interesting questions, well, two here that sort of go together, I suppose, to some extent. I'll deal with the first one first. Are there applications for anything other than water using this system, or is it strictly a water purification system?
So although we have focused around the water, we have done testing, and providing it will flow, basically providing access to a liquid solution, then we can treat it. So we've done some testing around sugar solutions and things like that to remove TDS from them. So yes, we can. We'd have to take a little bit more of a closer look. So if you can send information through to us, and I can have a look and get back to you.
I guess it would be okay if we sent out an email to everyone with your contact information.
Absolutely, it's joshua.summers@voltaire.com, and I'm at LinkedIn, and I'm sure you can share that. Yeah,
well, if you send that information to me after the event, we'll make sure that we can distribute that.
Thank you.
Another question that came in, which is, as that's sort of related. What is the impact of oil in the feed water?
So we would not want to treat oil. We'd want to remove that before as a pre-treatment step.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Any feel for energy consumption per gallon or whatever your units would be for this?
So we, so compared to, I was going to naturally compare it to RO, but compared to RO, we're significantly lower. Energy usage per gallon or per 1,000 gallon would be around 1 to 1.2 kilowatt hours per 1,000 gallons. And it depends on that feed water TDS level and the target output.
Okay. And I guess a couple more here. They're coming in quick and fast, actually. So is the system competitive with salt-based systems for residential use?
Competitive in what manner? So yes, I'd say the system's competitive, and to go out on a confident limb here, I honestly believe that we're the technology that will knock salt-based softeners off the perch, or certainly take a chunk of their business. Cue up the hate mail from that. So we're very different. So whereas the softener is just going to remove the hardness and replace it with soft salts, we're going to reduce all of the TDS in the water. So we're not only softening or reducing the hardness, but we're also reducing the other salts. So the chlorides, the nitrates, phosphates, sulfates, potassium, sodium, anything with a charge in the water, also all your metals, arsenic, things like that. So we have some advantages over softeners in that manner. And then the flip side, or the major benefit, is we don't need salt to regenerate. So we're not adding that brine to the wastewater stream. We're not regenerating any additional chemicals or additional salts. We're just going to send our waste to drain, to the municipal drain, and it's just going to be concentrated TDS that's already come in. So really net the effect on the environment is pretty much zero, because for instance, residential use, most of your water is going to flow into the house. It will be treated by the CAP-DI, and then at the waste point, our concentrate will recombine with the lower TDS quality water that's been sent through the house. So net, you're going to see very little change to the TDS loading going to drain. So environmentally, we're a significant step forward compared to salt-based softeners. And then on the product water, I'd say we're better, because we can overall reduce the TDS and hardness, but we're not just exchanging one bad thing for a slightly better thing.
Okay.
I hope that kind of answers the question.
Yeah, look at your overall material balance is already what you're saying, huh?
Yeah.
Good. There are a few more questions, so let's keep going. I think we have a little bit of time in hand. I don't recognize this abbreviation, so hopefully you will, but it says, have you tested for removal of PFAS or PFAs?
So perfluorinated compounds.
Okay, thank you.
We haven't done any formal testing around it. Theoretically, they should be removed because they'll be charged, but we haven't done any formal testing around them.
Okay. This is a very general question, which I guess may have been covered in the presentation, but you might want to comment on this. How is the membrane different than RO? What's the basic
so with an RO, you're using a physical or a semi-permeable membrane to physically filter the water, and it's basically you're forcing all of your water across a semi-permeable barrier that's going to reject any salts, any viruses, bacteria, basically anything. With capacitive or membrane capacitive deionization, you're running the water across layers of electrodes, so it's flow parallel or next to the electrodes, and those electrodes are coated with ion exchange membranes. The reason that we have those ion exchange membranes are to allow transport of the salt across them, but they do not physically filter the water. So those membranes are just designed to separate positive salts from negative cations from anionic salts. I don't think I've really answered the question well there.
That's fine. You always have the whole presentation.
It's a very different process. Whereas with RO, you're physically filtering the water. With CAP-DI, you're using electricity to remove the TDS from the water.
Excellent. That's a good summary. Maybe one more question, and then we'll probably have to move on. So this was an interesting question. How would this work as a brine recovery process? And then to clarify, taking RO reject and cleaning it up, for example, for cooling water use. Have you looked at those sort of applications?
So we have, and it's a great application. Again, it boils down to the TDS coming in and the target that you want out. But there's a number of applications where we take the RO reject and we, as you say, clean that up or tidy that up and then send it back into either the RO or maybe tidy it up and send it elsewhere in an industrial plant, for instance, a cooling tower, or somewhere else that needs a higher quality water. So we also do a lot of automotive work with rinse lines and paint lines where we take the rinse water and we run that through the CAP-DI, just as you would with the RO reject. We drop out the TDS and then we send that water back to the rinse line or onto another process.
Very good.
And then I just see one from Mark Harkness. How does the energy input compare with an RO system? Jim, I love you, but would you mind muting? Thank you.
Yeah.
So in answer to your question, Mark, compared to the average RO system, we are going to be a third to half the energy consumption, and our recovery is probably going to be 10 to 30% higher. 10 to 30% higher. So with a CAP-DI system, you're going to recover more water and your OPEX is going to be significantly lower. The main energy saving versus an RO system is just going to be pure energy. We're running our system at around 35 to 40 PSI, whereas an industrial RO system, you're running anywhere from 100 to 200 PSI. So it pretty much boils down to that. And then you have the other operational costs from chemicals. CAP-DI is a lot more robust, so it needs less cleaning, less chemical usage. You get the higher recovery and less maintenance. All of our cleanings are automated and the system kind of runs itself, which I appreciate. I may be a little bit biased, but most ROs are a little bit more labor intensive.
Very good. I think we're going to have to wrap it up here, but that was an excellent discussion, and thanks also to Jim for his presentation to lead us into that. And I guess at this point we will move on. And so thanks, Josh, much appreciated. Let me bring up our next speaker. Who should
Thank you.
Thank you. Should be Somnath Basu. So I'll unmute Somnath and his colleague Paul Sun. And let's go back in and see if we can share screen again. Okay, so just a reminder of the things I mentioned just at the top of the program. If you require PDH forms for the Water Forum, please send a chat message to Lee Lopez, and you'll see her ID there is L Lopez 37. So send her a chat message, provide the name that you want to be shown on your certificate, specify that this is for the Water Forum rather than for the STS meeting which follows, and then also give the email address so she can send the certificate to you. This is for Texas PDHs. If you are looking for certificates for Florida or other states, then you'll need to send Lee an email. Here is her address, llopez37@central.uh.edu. She will need your name as you want it to appear on the certificate, certificate number on your professional engineer certificate, and the licensing entity, the state or country. And then in the subject line, show Texas Water Forum PDU. So with that information, we will be able to get you your Florida or other states or other jurisdiction certificate as well. And going back to the Q&A, if you would please send Q&A messages to me specifically rather than to everyone. So it gets a little confusing when there are a lot of Q&A questions mixed in with general chat on the chat system. So please send them to me so that I will then be able to channel them to the presenter at the appropriate time. And with that, I would like to introduce our next presentation. And we have Somnath Basu and Paul Sun representing Headworks International. And they will be speaking about petroleum refinery wastewater treatment principles and operational challenges. And they will be giving us some interesting case studies with this. And let me just make sure, I think I have unmuted you. Let me hand over the remote control to Somnath.
Hello.
Hello,
Can you all
Somnath.
hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alan. And thanks for the introduction. I'm Somnath Basu, and with me, Dr. Paul Sun, my colleague at Headworks International and previously at Shell Oil Company. And we'll be presenting on refinery wastewater treatment, the principles and operational challenges. I'm afraid we may not be able to get much into the case studies because of the limitation of time, but we can certainly discuss more during the Q&A session. I will be starting out with the presentation. After I complete the presentation, the Q&A will be addressed by by Paul. Okay, so let me move on. I think, Alan, you have to move. I am unable to move the slides.
Okay, I guess we're back to where we were before then. Let's,
Yes.
we'll do it that way if that's what we got to do. Okay, let's see if this works now. Okay, there you go. I've got control.
Okay, this is just the title slide. I think we can move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the outline. First is the total water network and refinery, then process water management, and wastewater treatment. Our main focus is on wastewater treatment and also a biological wastewater treatment. That is very intriguing. And then finally, the environmental impacts and summary and conclusions. Next slide, please. So there is no area in a petroleum refinery that is not touched by water. Water is kind of all pervasive, and everywhere water is associated with the refining process. And I will, although this flowchart appears to be complicated, but I will explain what it means. Okay, then first, let's talk about stormwater. Stormwater from non-process areas, those are not contaminated, so they can be directly discharged into the receiving body of water. Then from process areas, they can be contaminated by hydrocarbons, so they are first discharged, collected into a detention basin, and depending upon the concentration of pollutants, if any. Hi, Alan.
Hello there.
Hello.
Interesting. Not quite sure what happened though. Let's try again.
Okay. Okay, so depending upon the presence of contaminants, it will be either discharged or it will be sent to the effluent treatment plant, ETP. River or seawater, in certain refineries, they do use seawater for cooling, condensing, and there is a possibility if those coolers and condensers are in process areas, there is possibility of tube leakage and contamination by hydrocarbons. So again, depending upon the presence and concentration of contaminants, they are either sent to the ETP or discharged if they're determined to be clean enough. Then water is mainly supplied by the city or wells, groundwater wells, and to a refinery, and goes to the water treatment process. And after treatment, the treated water is distributed to various consumers like cooling water makeup, service water, then sanitary water. For sanitary water, it has to go through a disinfection system. And then the sludge is sent out for disposal. There is also a part of water that is sent out as boiler feed makeup. It goes through the demineralizers first, and then it goes to boilers, and the steam can either go to the process units for stripping steam or ejector, or it can go to turbines and condensers. So the condensate can go back to the boiler feed water tank after the polishing unit. If it is used for process, then the condensate is stripped with the sour water stripper. The stripped sour water is used for desalting. The brine is sent to the effluent treatment. And then all the blowdowns from boilers and cooling towers and polishing units, everything is collected, and again, they are either sent to the effluent treatment or discharged. So that is, in a nutshell, the total water network. in a refinery. And then we'll go into the wastewater treatment aspect. Can you please move to the next one, Alan? Okay, the next one. Okay, so wastewater treatment, the general scheme is that, like I mentioned before, all the blowdown streams, contaminated process runoff, contaminated process waste, spent caustic, stripped sour water, desalted brine, everything is collected together and they're all laid into the treatment process. And you can see at the bottom, this is the treatment line. And here the process starts with API separator, where the bulk of oil and solids are removed. Then it goes to an equalization tank. The purpose of the equalization tank is to absorb the shocks due to sudden surge of flow or contaminants into the wastewater stream. And after that, it goes to a dissolved nitrogen flotation unit for fine removal of primarily oil and any solids. And then it is ready for biological treatment. It goes to the biological reactors. Then after biological treatment, it goes to a storage tank, and finally through the effluent filters, it is discharged and the sludge is disposed separately. Next slide, please. Next one. Okay, primary treatment has two steps. Primary oil water separation by API separators. And here, the bulk separation takes place here. This is the very first unit operation in a wastewater treatment train refineries. So typical effluent oil concentration anywhere 50 to 150 ppm, whereas influent can be anywhere 1,000 or even more. And here, mainly the free phase oil is separated. Oil can exist in a refinery wastewater in three forms: free phase, which can float easily; emulsified, which is difficult to separate; and then in dissolved phase. So mainly free phase oil is separated in API separators, and their operation and design is guided by API standard. These days, these separators have to be covered to avoid air emissions of hydrocarbons, and because there is enclosed space, so it has to be purged with an inert gas, which is typically nitrogen, to avoid any explosive situation. Next one, please. Okay, so this shows a typical schematic view of API separator. The water comes in, it goes out here, and it is purely gravity separation. So oil floats up, the solids settle down, and there is significant amounts of solids that come with the crude in the form of sand and other debris. So these solids settle down, they are collected in a hopper and they are disposed. Here the oil floats up, the oil is skimmed by a skimmer and it is separated and sent back to the crude tank, and the effluent comes out. So this is the effluent from the API separator. You can see some views. This is the cover on the top of the API separator. It's just a photograph. This shows the internal mechanism, the raking mechanism, skimming mechanism, etc. Next one, please. Okay, we are not showing the equalization tank. That's just a vertical tank in most cases, allowing about a day of retention time. But the secondary oil water separation is by flotation, and there can be two types of flotation: induced gas flotation and dissolved nitrogen flotation. Here, dissolved nitrogen flotation takes place. In both cases, the majority of oil that is separated is emulsified oil, which is very difficult to separate just by gravity. So here it is, the separation is assisted by bubbles of gas. And in this case, the gas is nitrogen, and nitrogen is pressurized by water, high pressure water, and nitrogen and high pressure. They form a solution, and that high pressure is released at the inlet of the DNF. And as the pressure is released, the gas bubbles come out in very tiny micro bubbles. And typically in dissolved nitrogen flotation units, the gas bubbles range from 10 micron to 100 microns range. And as the bubbles rise, they attach the very tiny bubbles of oil on their outer surface, and the whole thing moves up and it forms a blanket up on the top. And there is a skimmer that removes the oil blanket from the top and just sends it to the crude tank. It is collected and sent to the crude tank, or maybe a stop tank for first separation. There is also IGF, induced gas flotation unit. Here the bubbles are formed by mechanical means, like in this case by rotating units, and where the bubbles are created by shear, and in this case by inductors. But these bubbles are much larger size. You can see the bubble size range for IGF, and the efficiency of separation performance depends upon the air bubble size. So obviously the separation efficiency is better in DNF than IGF. But they have their special niche. So I'm not going to get into that because we have limited time. So let's move on, please, Alan. Next one. So now we move on to the biological treatment. The basic principle of biological treatment is mostly the contaminants are organic materials that originate from oil. So organic pollutants plus oxygen plus nitrogen, some amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus are needed because they support the growth of biomass. They are nutrients, and some micronutrients which are listed here, some of the metals and other elements. Those react together, and this oxidation reaction is catalyzed by enzymes that are secreted from the body of the biomass, from the bacteria. So as a result of that, the oxidation reaction takes place, and the products are carbon dioxide and water. But part of the organic matter participates in forming new cells, and that is their reproduction process. So there is a net growth of cells, and then some microbial byproducts, and it also produces energy. This energy is needed for them to move around because they need energy for metabolic purposes, for respiration, for reproduction. So that energy is provided by the oxidation of organics. You can compare that with how we humans assimilate food. So when we metabolize food, we also develop energy. We also respire, produce CO2 and H2O. And in our case, new cells are what is deposited in our body. So it is very similar, particularly for aerobic biochemical reactions. And some cells die, so there is some decay. So there is some decay that comes out as sludge. Next slide, please. Okay, and I will quote Dr. Van Loosdrecht of Technical University of Delft. He is considered one of the gurus in this field, and according to him, for BOD removal, BOD is the organic matter that is associated with oil or organics. So it is the stoichiometry that controls the reaction. And in case of nitrification, and I have not delved much into nitrification, but there are locations where the regulators ask for removal of ammonia by nitrification, ammonia oxidation to nitrate ions. So for those, it is the kinetics that controls. So there is a long retention time that is required in the bioreactors. Next one, please. Okay, so this gives a broad classification of the types of biochemical reactions. Suspended growth versus attached growth. Suspended growth, here the bacteria is uniformly suspended, distributed throughout the bioreactor. And then it can be batch, it can be continuous. Attached growth is where the bacteria is attached onto solid surfaces as fixed films. And as the wastewater pass through those solid surfaces, the biomass reacts with the organics and mediates the oxidation reaction. That's the basic difference. But there are different types of reactors. The most common most common process for wastewater treatment is conventional activated sludge process. 80% of all wastewater treatment plants, regardless of municipal or industrial, are activated sludge plants. And there are fixed film processes or attached growth processes like rotating biological contactors, then moving bed bioreactors, and I will describe those in the next few slides. Please, let's move on, Alan. Okay, this is a very broad overview of the conventional activated sludge process. Here, the influent comes in. Aeration tanks is the bioreactor where air is supplied to supply oxygen. And oxygen is necessary for keeping the whole tank mixed, well mixed, uniformly mixed, and also to supply oxygen for the respiration, for metabolic processes of bacteria. And then what comes out is the solid liquid suspension. The biomass separates, just gravity process, separates at the bottom, settles, and then the clarified water comes out as effluent. The solids that come out from here, a part of it is wasted. Why wasted? Because the solids grow in number due to the growth in biomass. As I mentioned before, there is reproduction in the system. So the net growth is wasted so that the concentration of biomass in the aeration tank is fixed for steady state operation. And then the remaining solids are sent back here, which act as seed for the incoming influent organic matter to be oxidized. Next slide, please. Okay, now that is the traditional process. There have been some new innovations in the past 2 to 3 decades, which are no longer new truly, because there is widespread application that has been going on with these processes. And what are the drivers for new processes? Number one, increasing need to recycle and reuse treated wastewater globally, because water is a precious and dwindling resource all over the world. So reuse is very much of a focus. Then need to treat increasing volumes of wastewater resulting from increased throughput in crude in refineries. And then tighter regulations, and that's where nutrient control is necessary. Just BOD removal is not enough. You have to also remove nitrogen and phosphorus that may be coming with the wastewater in a refinery. What are these? I am listing 3 processes: membrane bioreactors, moving bed bioreactors, integrated fixed film activated sludge reactors. Next slide, please. Okay, membrane bioreactor, this is the general scheme. Influent comes in. This is a suspended growth process, but the main difference with conventional activated process, such sludge processes, that the solids concentration, the biomass concentration in here is much larger than conventional processes. Here it is like 8,000 to 10,000 ppm, as opposed to about 2,000 to 4,000 ppm in conventional activated sludge process. As a result, the footprint is very, very reduced here. So that's a big advantage. And with the price of land and the real estate, and many refineries, many utilities don't have any space to expand and accommodate higher capacity. So in that case, this is a very good option. And the best advantage is that the solid liquid slurry that comes out, that is separated by an ultrafiltration membrane. It's not gravity separation. So the quality of effluent is very high, the BOD and TSS is less than 2, and that can be directly used for cooling tower, or it can be sent to an RO unit for boiler feed water. And then again, the net growth is wasted, and the rest of the sludge is returned to the return activated sludge to the bioreactor. Can we move on, please, Alan? Okay, so the next one is MBBR, moving bed biological reactor. Here, the influent comes in. These are the bioreactors in series. Here, there are media, plastic or HDPE media that are continuously suspended into this water. This suspension is created by aeration, by supplying air, and air serves both to supply oxygen and mixing energy. So here on the surface of the media, the biomass grows as films and they oxidize the organic matter in the influent. The treated effluent comes out. This is the solid liquid separation. The main advantage here is that, again, the advantage with respect to the footprint, because the biomass is compact in the form of films. So the density is much greater than in case of activated sludge process. And it's almost hands-free process because there is no recycle. So the whatever sludge is produced, that is wasted. So it requires minimal oversight by operating personnel. It can be even operated from remote. So those are the main advantages. Can we move on, please? So yeah, I listed here the advantages. And one other major advantage is that this is very, very forgiving to shock loads, toxic shocks, peak flows, etc. Because in case of such shocks, the biomass that is in the layer, most outside layer, that can wash out. But still, there are layers inside where they can still stay and they can still keep working. So that's one other major advantage. Disadvantage is the settling property is not as good as activated sludge process. So you have to use a DAF for solid liquid separation rather than gravity separator. Next slide, please. Okay, here IFAS, integrated fixed film activated sludge process. Here, the main difference with MBBR is that the sludge is returned. So this can use a gravity clarifier, the sludge is returned, and this is a hybrid, meaning because the sludge is returned, there is attached growth as well as suspended growth. So as a result of that, this takes advantage of both the suspended growth process and attached growth process. And the footprint area requirement is even less than what it is for MBBR. So, and the kind of sludge that is amenable to gravity settling. So this is very good for upgrading an existing facility where there is gravity clarifier. So you can continue using the gravity clarifier and upgrade the existing reactor to an IFAS. Next one, please. So now I am going to get into some operating challenges. There are a couple of slides on that. So in two areas, there can be operating challenges. In the primary treatment area where oil and solids removal systems in API separators and DGF, DNF. Now, these days, they all have to be covered. And that makes it very difficult for operation and maintenance. You cannot see from outside unless you open some hatch or something. And also, there is a lot of salt, particularly the API separators. They collect a lot of solids at the bottom to the extent that the scraper, the bottom sludge scraper, sometimes get jammed and the motors burn out. That's not very uncommon. That is one of the operating challenges. And then also sludge accumulation in equalization tanks, that reduces the active volume and the retention time. So the equalization function is compromised there for solids accumulation. So all of these can affect the biological treatment, because the better the oil separation and solid separation is in the front end, the easier it is for the biological treatment to function smoothly. If there is a lot of oil that pass through, that will coat the biomass, and there is a diffusion limitation so of oxygen and the substrates into the core of the biomass, and they fail. Next one, please. Okay, with the biological treatment, if there is spillage due to excessive carryover of oil and gas, as I mentioned, there is the performance fails, and also it leads to foaming. And in extreme cases, foaming can lead to spillover from the reactor tanks. So that is something that needs to be arrested in the primary treatment. The oil separation and removal should be very efficient. Then these days, because of the increased use of oil from the hydrofracturing operations, those oils typically contain high H2S, and to restrict the emissions of H2S, the producers add a lot of amines, and those amines show up with the crude, and they upset the biological treatment, because amines, they contain a lot of nitrogenous compounds, and they demand a lot of dissolved oxygen, whereas the design may not have that much oxygen capacity. So the biological treatment fails at some point. So that is something that needs to be taken care of. So another thing is the dissolved oxygen can be more distributed in sludge, flocks, and films. So that's a diffusion limitation. So the other thing is, for biological treatment, you need nutrients. Nitrogen is one of the major nutrients that is always associated with crude and wastewater. But typically, crude doesn't contain any phosphorus. So phosphorus has to be added in the form of phosphoric acid or diammonium phosphate to supplement the nutrient need, so the growth of the biomass is balanced and they perform well. Then many cases, the effluent is collected in a pond, and these ponds are very much prone to algal growth, and algal growth can cause diurnal changes in dissolved oxygen and dissolved oxygen and carbon dioxide. So there can be diurnal changes in pH and dissolved oxygen, which can also lead to excessive carryover in treated effluent with the discharge. Next one, please. Okay, this is the last slide. Summary and conclusions. In fact, wastewater treatment is critical to the success of uninterrupted refinery operation. This is very important, because although wastewater treatment is at a corner of a refinery, and typically this is not too much cared for, but if there is a permit violation, the regulators can come and lock up the whole refinery, and that can lead to non-performance of the whole refinery. So this has to be taken care of. Then processed water management plays a very important role, particularly sour water stripper and desalter, because they hold the key how much hydrocarbon and ammonia and H2S passes through those units into the wastewater treatment. That has to be controlled very well. It is a wastewater treatment system has to be considered an integrated process with the main hydrocarbon processing unit. So the whole thing as a whole functions smoothly. And as I mentioned before, growing trend of opportunity crudes makes the downstream hydrocarbon and wastewater treatment processes vulnerable to upsets, leading to unscheduled shutdowns. And most importantly, if there is an operating challenge, there has to be a clear understanding. So understanding of the basics is the key to success. And there is no unique or generic solution. each has to be handled on a case-by-case basis. And that's why it's very important that operating engineers and operating staff are trained properly in wastewater treatment process. So I think that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer questions. Actually, Dr. Paulson, my colleague, he will answer the questions.
Well, very good. Thank you, Somnath, and welcome, Paul. I am seeing quite a few questions coming in. We have a few minutes and that we have to deal with this. So the first one I see here asks, why use DNF, dissolved nitrogen flotation, as opposed to DAF with dissolved air? What's the specific benefit given that you have the extra cost of securing nitrogen gas and compressing it?
This is Paul Sun. Thank you for the question. The dissolved nitrogen gas flotations is required because of the air pollution, air toxic rule. You have to cover the unit in order to restrict the emission of volatile organics. Once you cover the tank, it becomes explosive mixture. And it's for the safety reasons, we have to use nitrogen instead of air. So it's based on safety and air regulation requirement.
Excellent. That's a good answer. Question here from Curtin Trivedi. Is there any new technology, or can we adopt some of these ideas for water separation that you've discussed to remove water from oil, for example, remove water from diesel to meet product specs?
Well, that's more of a refining technology. I really not qualified to answer in that. I'm more or less dealing with water, not dealing with oil.
Okay, fair enough. Two people asked the same question, and it's actually really a question for me. Will the presentations be available for participants? And the answer is yes. We will be putting PDFs of the presentation, of all the presentations on our website. So you should have the link to the Texas Industrial Energy Efficiency Program website with the invitation emails. So if you go there, you will find, probably next week, you should find the presentations available there. I think there was one more technical technical question here. Any retrofit recommendations for APIs to replace scrapers with something more reliable?
There are some newer APIs that is coming onto the market. They use different type of sludge removal processes, using auger, using that kind of thing. And some other people use a simplified technology. Actually, they use a tank and let the solids drop out of the tank and periodically get into the tank and clean up the sludge. So that's the two technologies that I know of.
Okay, very good. And unfortunately, we've sort of run out of time there for questions. We do need to move along, but thank you very much, Paul and Somnath, for that presentation. That was fascinating stuff. And I'm sure we're going to do much better with.
Last question?
Who is it? Okay, one quick question, yes.
I was just, this is Ishin Kaya from Canada, Mixanox Systems, and I was trying to type the question. I was a little late. I'll read the question myself. The question goes to Mr. Basu. You mentioned that the high dissolved oxygen value is higher than 3 milligram per liter as a requirement for, and also disadvantage for the MBBR systems. But I've heard that it's most of the MBBR systems runs inadvertently high dissolved oxygen values, which is caused by the mixing requirement inadvertently happening. So you need mixing more than air requirements so that the air, dissolved air, approaches to saturation almost, 5-8 milligram per liter. So if that's the case, how then sounds like that it's requirement of 3 milligram per liter oxygen wouldn't be a disadvantage. Can you elaborate on that?
Okay, basically, mixing and biochemical oxidation oxygen requirement are two functions that air performs. Now, most of the cases, the dissolved oxygen for biochemical oxidation that dominates. Mixing is determined by the volume of the reactor. In most cases, unless it's a very large reactor where the mixing energy requirement is high and you need to really supply a lot of air to keep the media moving, so it exceeds 3 to 4 dissolved oxygen, the DO. But typically, in most of the cases from our own experience, we have seen the dissolved oxygen requirement 3 to 4, 3 in case of BOD oxidation, 4 in case of nitrification. Typically more than 2 or 2.5 that is used for activated starch process. Why? Because the oxygen diffuses through the biofilm. So there is a diffusion resistance there. So it's just transport phenomenon. So you have to apply in the bulk phase, you have to apply high enough oxygen concentration. So the core of the biofilms that are attached directly to the surface of the solid media does get the nourishment, does get the oxygen so they can respire. So that's the short answer. But we can elaborate on that. Alan will post my email address and telephone number.
Yes,
this
fine.
is such a vast subject. I just touched upon.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. It's especially the diffused aeration is not the best mixing system, in my opinion, for the MEBR systems. So that inadvertently getting these high dissolved oxygens are not making.
I guess we can talk offline on this because
yes, we have to move on, I'm afraid. But you're right, this is a fascinating discussion. I would suggest, Somnath, you can do what Josh did a bit earlier and maybe give your email as a chat message here too.
Yes,
we can also distribute contact information for you if you wish to
me
the
and Paul, for both of us.
Okay, we will do that.
Discuss. Yes.
Very good. Meanwhile, though, I think we do now need to move on. We do have a deadline for the end of this, so I'd like to call on our next speaker, who is Juan Pinto from Energy Recovery Incorporated, and he will be talking about energy consumption and desalination. And let me just see. So yeah, sorry. If you would like, I will stop sharing here, and I think you would like to prefer to run your own slides, correct, Miguel?
Correct.
Juan, yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
I like it. Where are you swimming there?
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we got it.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. First, I want to start saying thank you to the University of Houston for this invitation. I'm here on behalf of Energy Recovery Inc. I want to talk about energy consumption and desalination. My name is Juan Pinto. I'm the Director of Sales and Strategy for Energy Recovery Inc. So the agenda is going to be introduction, desalination, seawater reverse osmosis, energy consumption, renewable energy, and conclusions. So why do we need desalination or seawater desalination? This is an overall water risk map from 2020. And you can see that basically anything with soft yellow is an area with plenty water, and anything with red, dark red, you need more risk. As you can see in the specific case of Texas, you have a bunch of red spots as Texas needs more water. Mexico, Peru, Chile, all Africa, Middle East, South Asia, Australia, more or less, we need more sources of water. And seawater desalination is an option to increase water availability, increase other sources of water. It's not only water, it's also about quality of water. So per the World Bank, you have a low amount of water, potentially can be lowered by 6%. However, if you have plenty water, that will help you out to increase your GDP plus 6%. So water is not about what we drink, what we use in the house. It's also how it's going to affect the economy of the country. So now let's get into the topic, desalination. So desalination is a process to remove salt from water. So you can remove salt from brackish water, from a lake, from a river, from different sources. For this specific presentation, I'm going to be focusing in seawater. So let's just start talking about desalination in seawater. In 1970, we had the first technology called thermal technology. That is basically a multi-stage flash technology that is going to evaporate and condensate the water to then have water without salt. In 1982, we start playing with the membrane technologies. 2002, we get several improvements in the membrane technologies by having better membranes, higher efficiency pumps, energy recovery devices, and other changes. And by 2005, will be one of the milestones where we connect desalination with renewable energies. But let's talk about the cost. What is the cost of the water? So the first line, that will be the thermal one, is going to be numbered from 1970. So you can see that in average, for every cubic meter of water, the cost was $2.4. Then in 1982, we started using membrane technology. So the price of the water went down from 2.4 to 1.6. But something really important, if you see these costs, we break it down between electric power, maintenance, CapEx charge, and steam. You can see when we move to membrane technology, electric power is one of the biggest costs of the water. Then 1982, we keep going down from 1.6 to 1.1. Then 2002, we start using high efficiency energy recovery devices, high efficiency pumps, and we can drop it from 1.1 to 0.7. And then finally in 2020, we have been able to achieve prices in $0.41 per cubic meter and $0.47 per cubic meter. So you can see that with the time, technology is getting better, prices are getting better, and the cost of the desalinated water is getting better. So how much is growing the desalination market? You can see per this table from GWI, in June of 2019, there was 1,056 NGD of seawater desalinated plants installed in the world, only in this year, by June. So we're waiting for more plants by end of 2019. Then if you see this graph where you can see the territories, Gulf, MENA, East Asia, Americas, the Persian Gulf is the territory with higher demand of seawater RO process. And finally, between the two technologies, the membrane technology and the thermal technology, you can see that membrane technology, due to the lower cost to produce water, has been the preferred technology in the industry in the last 10 years. So now let's talk a little more about what is a seawater reverse osmosis plant. So a seawater reverse osmosis plant is going to follow this path. You have seawater, then you get the intake pump, then you have a pretreatment. The pretreatment is going to be based on the water quality. In this case, we have a DAF, filter feed pump, multimedia filter, cartridge filters. Then the water is going to comply with some specific requirements, and we go to a reverse osmosis system. This reverse osmosis system is what we're going to be focusing in this presentation, basically in the energy recovery devices. And from the RO, we get produced water tank, and then we get reject water. So we can see now the following video that will explain in detail how is that RO plant. This plant is located in Spain, Barcelona.
The Llobregat desalination plant is located in the municipality of El Prat de Llobregat, next to the mouth of the river.
We're not seeing it, Miguel.
Sorry?
We're not seeing it, Miguel.
Oh, you didn't see the video?
No, you'll need to select it in the share screen when you're going to share screen and select it specifically.
Okay, let me do that really quick, sorry. Come on. I guess have stop share.
Yeah, stop share and restart. Make sure you select the right screen.
Yes. Can you see the video now?
There you go. You got it.
So let me start from scratch.
Not
So as I
hearing you.
told you before, this plant is located in Spain, Barcelona. It's one of the largest seawater arrow plant in Spain.
The Llobregat desalination plant is located in the municipality of El Prat de Llobregat, next to the mouth of the river. It can produce 60 cubic hectometers a year, in other words, 200 million liters a day. The desalination process begins by collecting seawater through a 30-meter deep open intake tower and a 2.2-kilometer long underwater pipeline. A pumping station will send up to 6 cubic meters a second to the plant through a conduit that will cross the river Llobregat beneath its bed. Here, the water will undergo a pre-treatment, consisting mainly of separating the solid matter through flotation, open filtration through sand, closed pressure filtration, and microfiltration. The reverse osmosis process consists of passing this already filtered water through semi-permeable membranes that stop the mineral salts going through. High-pressure pumps are used to force the water through the membranes. 45 liters of fresh water can be obtained from every 100 liters of seawater subjected to osmosis. The remaining 55 liters of reject water have an excessive salt content. This reject water is still at high pressure, which is taken advantage of by using energy recoverers to reduce energy consumption by 50%. The fresh water obtained from the osmosis process is remineralized to make it fit for human consumption. Finally, the water is chlorinated to guarantee its disinfection and then pumped through an 11.5-kilometer long pipeline to the Font Santa reservoirs in San Juan d'Espí.
Let me go back with the presentation.
Very good.
So as you were able to see on the video, basically we have an intake system per treatment, where we have the arrow system, and then we have a post-treatment freshwater and brine disposal. So this is the main body of a seawater arrow plant. So we're going to be focusing this presentation in the energy recovery device process. So as we said before, in 1970, we started with multi-stage flash evaporation, thermal evaporation. The energy consumption was close to 22 kilowatts per cubic meter. Then through the process of the multi-stage flash evaporation, we have several technological improvements. So we were able to go from 23 kilowatts per cubic meter to more or less 14 cubic meter per hour. 1988, 1987, we start getting large membrane plants, or basically seawater arrow plants. And they start using, for first time, energy recovery devices called Francis turbine. The Francis turbine was able to keep reducing the energy consumption from 13 to more or less to 7, 8 kilowatts per cubic meter. Then we get the Pelton turbine, another ERD with higher efficiency, and we keep reducing the energy consumption. And we were close to reach maybe 4 cubic meters per hour. And finally, we have the isobaric device, that is the one that my company makes, that you get the highest efficiency. And we were able to drop it maybe close to 2 to 3 cubic meters per hour. And we can see here a map of how is the energy consumption per process. So the intake in average is 0.45, prefiltration is 0.24. The RO process is going to consume more or less 60% of all the energy of the seawater RO plant. That's why it's so important to do the right design and the right equipment to reduce the cost of the water. Then we have the permit treatment, and then we have permit distribution. So as you can see, for this specific case, we are estimating an energy consumption of 3 kilowatts per hour per cubic meter. From those 3, 2 are the reverse osmosis systems. From the key component is going to be here the ERD. That's what we're going to explain in the next slides. So for this system, it's a system that we don't have an energy recovery device. So the high pressure pump is going to take all the feed water and is going to boost it at 920 PSIs. You get fresh water, but at the same time you get concentrate. This concentrate is coming out at 900 PSIs, 300 gallons per minute. What happened in this case, at that moment in 1985, 1983, we did not have any technology to use this pressure. So we used to have a valve, and the valve was dropping the energy from 900 PSIs to 20 PSIs. And then we send the water back to the ocean. So one of the first turbines was the Pelton wheel. So the Pelton wheel was able to reduce the specific energy consumption by 4 kilowatts per hour per cubic meter. So in this case, we're taking the energy of the concentrate, 900 PSIs and 300 gallons per minute, and we're transferring to the motor by a shaft. And then the motor plus the turbine is going to boost the pressure of the feed water from 30 PSIs to 920 PSIs. So this kind of centrifugal devices keep improving and keep having new technologies. Then we have the next level of the Pelton turbine was the turbocharger. So the turbocharger, we can call it a booster pump without motor. So the turbocharger is going to take the energy of the concentrate, 900 PSIs, 300 gallons per minute, and is going to transfer that energy to the feed water, and it's going to increase the pressure. So for this case, your high pressure pump is going from 30 PSIs to 595 PSIs. Then the turbocharger is going to boost it from 595 to 920 PSIs. So it's a booster pump for 325 PSIs. That at the end is going to help you out to reduce the size of the motor and reduce the size of the high pressure pump. And the specific energy consumption for this kind of configuration is 3.6. Then the next level will be isobaric technology or pressure exchanger. So in this case, we have a feed water of 500 gallons per minute at 30 PSIs coming in. We're going to split it in 2 different flows. Flow number 1 goes to the high pressure pump. It's going to be 200 gallons per minute equal to the fresh water flow rate. And then the 300 gallons per minute goes to the pressure exchanger that is going to be equal to the concentrate flow range. So the pressure exchanger is going to have 2 inputs and 2 outputs. The first input is going to be concentrate at 900 PSIs, 300 gallons per minute. And the second input is going to be seawater at 300 gallons per minute at 30 PSIs. So we're going to transfer the 900 PSI from the concentrate to the seawater. Now the seawater is going to come out at 890 PSIs. So we're transferring 890 PSI from the concentrate to the seawater. So now we have 890 coming out from the pressure exchanger. Then we have a small booster pump that is going to equalize the pressure from 890 to 820, and then they go together to the membranes. And at the same time, this concentrate is going to come out at 14 PSIs, more or less. So I'm going to show you really quick an animation so you can see how it works inside. Can you see the animation or not?
Yes, you're good.
Okay.
The PX captures energy that would otherwise be wasted, reducing the desalination plant's high pressure pump flow requirements. Not only does this save electricity, it also cuts high pressure pump size requirements, producing further savings. Now, let's explore the engineering behind this innovation. Simply yet elegantly designed, the PX high pressure housing is the only moving part in the entire device. Surrounding the rotor are a sleeve and two end covers. These ceramic components fit snugly around the rotor to form a tight fluid seal. Water in the narrow gap around the rotor acts as a hydrodynamic bearing, requiring no external lubrication. High-pressure reject concentrate from a reverse osmosis plant's membranes flows into the PX. Low-pressure seawater simultaneously enters the PX and fills the rotor, where it is exposed briefly to the reject concentrate. Energy from the hydraulic pressure is then transferred directly from the concentrate to the seawater inside the rotor.
So the pressure exchanger is like a piston pump, but we don't have a piston. It's going to be water with water. So the concentrate from the membranes is going to push out seawater and it's going to transfer the energy. And then later on, the seawater is going to push out concentrate out of the pressure exchanger. So it's going to be two pistons of water. You have concentrate pushing out seawater and seawater pushing out concentrate. So it's a piston pump without pistons.
Now goes back into the system and joins the stream from the high pressure pump. Any remaining concentrate exits the rotor at a low pressure and is then pushed out by fresh seawater. The rotor ducts function like a cartridge, charging and discharging as the pressure transfer process repeats itself. The rotor, using only the fluid flow, can spin up to an astounding 1,200 rotations per minute.
So basically that's a pressure exchanger. And now when we're going to compare the three technologies, one of the main differences are going to be the efficiency. As you can see, the isobaric of pressure exchanger has a flat efficiency between 96 and 98% efficiency through all the flow. The centrifugal devices like the turbocharger and Pinto wheel are lower flow, lower efficiency, a higher flow, higher efficiency. However, if you keep in mind one of my first slides where I was telling you that 30%, 35% of the water cost is electricity, efficiency is really important. So we need to reduce any electricity costs as much as possible. So that's why it's recommended to use always a high efficiency energy recovery device to reduce the cost of the water. And we can now talk about an example in the USA. The USA largest seawater RO plant is located in California. The name is Carlsbad Seawater RO. We can see here the ubication in the map. It has a capacity of 50 MGD. It's using an isobaric technology, PX devices. So the PX devices are offering the following advantages for the plant. Savings of 116 million kilowatt hours per year. Those 116 million kilowatt per hour are equivalent to 82,107 metric tons per year of CO2 emissions. And it's equivalent to $12 million in electricity costs. So it's not only about saving energy, reducing costs, it's also about reducing the impact to the environment. So these 82,107 emissions of CO2 are equivalent to 90 millions of pounds of coal, or are equivalent to 200 millions of miles driven by a car. So you can see it's the big picture. It's not only about the saving costs, it's also about reducing the impact to the environment. So what will be the next level? The next level will be how can we keep reducing this impact? And one of the main options is to connect desalination with renewable energies. So we can see here really quick analysis. First, a small scale solar seawater desalination plant direct connect. So you have an RO plant, it's going to be connected to a solar panels, and it's going to give you enough electricity to produce water. So what is the challenge here? First, the solar power are going to be operate only between 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. So you have only 10 hours to produce the required water for your location. Therefore, you need to oversize your plant to produce all the water of 24 hours in 10 hours. And also, if you have any problem with the solar panel, you will be out of water. However, this is a good solution for locations where you don't have access to the grid. So if you are in a small island in really, really isolated location, this is the best option. Then the second option is, how can we go with renewable energies, but I want to operate 24 hours? We can combine solar power with wind power, plus storage of energy and backup generator. So the solar power is going to give you the electricity to operate between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. In those 10 hours, the wind turbines are going to put energy into the storage batteries. And at 5 o'clock, we're going to switch power. So we're going from solar power to the batteries in combination with the wind turbines. And if at any moment the wind turbines or the solar panels are not giving you enough electricity, you will go back to the backup generator. And then we have one of the best solutions, if it's possible, if you are close to an electric grid, so you can go to the electric grid. So what is the meaning of this? You have a renewable power plant that is going to connect to the electric grid. And at the same time, your desalination plant can connect to the electric grid. So here, what we're going to do is to offset the CO2 emissions. So the renewable power plant doesn't have to be next to the desalination plant. It can be totally far away from each other, but they're going to be connected to the same electric grid. And the goal is that if this plant is consuming 50 megawatts of energy, the renewable power plant is going to generate at least 50 megawatts. So it's going to offset one to each other. And we can see here some examples. This is a medium scale wind power desalination plant in China. It's designed for a 10,000 cubic meter per day. However, right now it's running only a 5,000. It's located in Jiangsu province, China. It started operation in 2014. It has a capacity of 1.3 NGD. It's using wind power and only one turbine of 2.5 megawatts. And one of the more important cases of desalination plus renewable energy is the plant in Australia, Perth. This plant was in construction in 2006, has a capacity of 32 NGD, and is consuming between 4 to 6 kilowatt hour of per cubic meter of water. In this case,
we're going to have to wind down, Juan. If you can maybe cut to your conclusions, that'd be good. Then we can have a few questions before we start.
Perfect. So for the conclusion, so basically, seawater reverse osmosis is a feasible option to increase water availability. Reverse osmosis is the preferred technology for desalination, and if we combine seawater RO with energy renewal, we can optimize the cost. But I have been talking about energy consumption, that we need 4 kilowatt hours. 4 kilowatt hours to produce water and everything. So I want to put that number in context. So right now, per the analysis, we know that to produce 1 cubic meter of desalinated water, we require 3 kilowatt hours. One family of 4 persons in the USA requires more or less 400 gallons of water per day. 400 gallons of water per day is equivalent to 1.5 cubic meter. So that means that to produce water for a family or 4 for one day in the USA, you're going to need more or less 6 kilowatt hours of energy. So the question is, what is 6 kilowatt hours of energy? So we can put it here in context. It's equivalent to using a microwave oven for 4 hours. It's equivalent to use a TV plasma for 20 hours, a space heater for 4 hours. So whoever is in, north of the USA, Canada, every time there is a space heater for 4 hours is equivalent to enough water for one family of 4 for one day. A water heater, and the more important one, a 3 tons air condition. A 3 tons air condition is what you need for a house between 12 and 1,500 square feet. So for 1.3 hours that we're using an air condition in Houston, for example, is equivalent to enough water for one family of 4 for one day. So with this, please, do you have any questions?
So I've had a couple of questions come in here, and we'll have to take just these 2 and then wrap up, I think, one. So there was a question here: can the pressure recovery exchanger be used on the Long Beach 2-stage RO process? Are you familiar with that one?
No, I don't know. I don't know that project specifically, but we have several projects in California, but I don't know about that one.
Okay. Another question that we have here was asking about cross-contamination. It sounds like you potentially mix your incoming and outgoing streams in your device. Doesn't that create problems?
Basically, it's a good question. there is a mixing between the concentrate water and the feed water. This mixing is equivalent to 5% volumetric mixing. That's equivalent to increase your membrane feed pressure by 15 psi's. So when we were designing pressure exchanger, you have two options. You can add a piston in the middle, or you remove the piston. So by removing the piston, you don't require any maintenance. And by removing the piston, you are going to increase the feed pressure from 1,000 psi's to 1,015 psi's. So from the design point of view, extra 15 psi's of pressure is a good price to pay for no maintenance. And yes, so we have a mixing, but for this specific application, it's not an issue.
Okay, very good. And I hate to break up the party, but at this point, we're going to have to do that. Thank you everyone for attending. We do just have one or two slides to close out with. So let's go back here. So thank you for joining us for this webinar. As I mentioned, we will be posting the slides on our website and also the recording of this. They will probably go up sometime next week. So do visit the website for that information. Also, as far as future events are concerned, the next scheduled TIEEP event is a technical session that we're contributing to the AICHE spring meeting. Many of you may know that was supposed to take place in April, March, April, and it actually got postponed to August. And we're still waiting for final clarification on what form that will take. But we are still slated to present our technical session on Gulf Coast clean energy. And then, as I mentioned, please visit our website. There you will find a lot of additional information about the program, and we'll also update all forthcoming events. And so I would, at that point, ask you if you'd like to stay for the AICHE monthly meeting. This will be predominantly a technical presentation, continuing the theme of water. As I mentioned right at the start of our session, Jason Afinowicz talking about the 2021 Region H Water Plan, which is a long-term planning for water in the greater Houston area. So we have about a 5-minute break, and then we'll be handing over to the AICHE team. So once again, thank you very much for joining us, and look forward to staying in touch with those of you who are going to be with the AICHE meeting, and the rest of you, hope to see you at the next TIEEP meeting. Thank you very much.